Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Portsmouth Committee on Arts and Nonprofits. It's Monday, May 16th, and it looks like it is currently 12:05 p.m. And we have an agenda today that was circulated last week. The first thing on the agenda, I'm very excited to do, which is approve the minutes of our December 20th, February 14th, March 21st, and April 18th meeting minutes. We have a quorum in person today, so we're going to be able to do that. So my first question is, does anyone need to pull anything? I recirculated all those minutes with the agenda so everyone could refresh. Was there anything that anyone wanted to update or change in any of those minutes? Okay, so I think we can approve them all as a group. So is there a motion to approve them?
So moved.
All right, motion from Robin. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Jason. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, seeing no opposition, we're all caught up now. Hooray. So the next thing that we have on the agenda for today was an AFTA study update. So Robin and Renee, take it away.
Okay, so last week we had our in-person meeting at the library to educate the different organizations, and we don't have the exact list here, but we think there were 10 organizations. There were about 15 or 16 people in the room. I think it went really well. We did have some questions. Surprisingly, only I think 2 people in the room had done it before, which was, we asked.
Maybe only one, I know it's Courtney.
Oh, that's right. You were the other one.
Right.
You were the other one. So we had a bunch of newbies, which was good. So we've educated them. Now we're going to have, since so many people apparently were not able to make it, we are having a follow-up Zoom education call on the 24th. Yeah. And
At 9 o'clock.
At 9 o'clock, right. And so we're resending out the invitation and, or sending out the invitation to that Zoom call, and hopefully we'll get the rest of the attendees at that point. And I'm sure I must have forgotten something. I don't know.
It's really just that we still have things that we have to send them. We gave them some hard copies of things we have to send them, the QR code. And then after the 24th, we will look at the list of those who had not attended, and we'll start reaching out individually to organizations with the help of the 2 other people on our committee and our project manager. So that's where we're headed, but people who have their things can start now. We just have to get the QR code out really quickly.
Yeah.
Because there's people ready to use it.
So just to repeat, the Zoom education meeting is on Tuesday, May 24th at 9 a.m.
Mm-hmm. And it'll just be a repeat of the same training. We have a slide set, so.
Right.
What's the goal on the number of surveys we hope to have taken?
We have a minimum requirement of 800. We hope to get more.
Yeah, we were reluctant to say that because we don't want people to say, oh, geez, divided by how many, I've done my portion, I'm done. Because that's going to hurt everybody, right? So, we want to get as many as possible. And, I say aim big, double that number. And the importance is, though, to get started in the summer months, because this ends at the end of April next year. So this is our season when most of us get the most traffic and the most, attendees. And since they're visitors, potentially the highest expenditures of people coming to town. So this is the real sweet spot of when we want to get the surveys done.
And there's a max per event, right? So like
Yes.
one event can't do 800 and say.
Right, well, but if, let's say, the park would be a good point, if they had posted at a really big show QR codes and got more than 50, that's fine.
Yeah.
The AFTA just says, we'd like you to max 50, but if you send us more, we're not gonna
take
toss
them,
them.
right?
No, I understand.
Right.
What I want to make sure is not like you can do one and get 800 and say we're good for the year.
No.
Yeah, it's spread out
Yeah,
over.
exactly.
Well, not only spread out, but they also want multiple kinds of venues, from art galleries to productions to concerts.
Right. And
Historic houses.
And the other thing that, they'd like us to do this year, which of course is a challenge for us, but nationwide, is to ensure more diversity in our responses. And so unfortunately, in our area, we don't have a very diverse, population, or in terms of the people that live live here and sometimes people that visit as well. So be thinking about, if you're having something for Juneteenth, for example, make sure you survey at that point. Anything else that will increase your chances of getting a diverse audience participation, I think is what they'd like us to do. They do have some guidelines. We unfortunately don't meet them in terms of how many, like 20% of the audience should be of, diverse background. We just don't have that, but they said do the best you can and try to get as much diversity as you can. So.
Okay, that makes sense.
I just wanted to say, we've been doing them for the past couple of weeks because our season ends next week and we don't run in the summer.
Yeah.
And I was amazed at how many people are happy to do it, eager to do it. A lot of people had done, they said, oh, this is the same as 5 years ago. And even new people. I used part of the pitch I used is I think this helped us get grants during COVID because
Yes.
we were able to prove what value we had to the economy. But most people moan and groan, but they didn't, we set it up, we had clipboards, and so they had, made it easy for them. We didn't have the QR code yet, but I was really surprised because in the past, people have been reluctant, but nobody said, oh no, I don't want to do that.
I think there's a reluctance on the part of the people actually, trying to do the survey because they don't, they're not maybe comfortable approaching people. But I think they'll find what you find when you do approach it, particularly if you have a venue where you can make an announcement at the beginning, like if it's a performance and somebody gets up in the beginning saying, we are participating in this, you may be approached by somebody at intermission, or if you could please help us, or at a gallery, if an opening, you say at the beginning of the opening, we'd love to get your input. I think that softens it a little so people don't, somebody doesn't hand you something like, no, I don't want to do that. So, I feel real positive. I think we're going to do well.
And just know that each date needs a form batch cover sheet,
Yeah.
and you can just email us and we will come and get it.
So each date, not each event, and this is like a run-up show,
Right,
so,
each
Right,
date.
each date.
oh dear, okay.
That's the big part of the training, each
Yeah.
date. If you do it on a Saturday night and next time you do it on a Friday night, that Saturday needs to be put together with a cover sheet. Okay, and that Friday needs to be put together with a cover sheet. And we just pick them up.
That's it. Yep.
All right, excellent. Any other questions about the active study at this point? All right, thank you, Robin and Renee. Really appreciate all the work you're doing on this. Jason, do we have a marketing update?
We do. I actually just got a copy of the first month's performance report yesterday afternoon, so I didn't have a tremendous amount of time to really get into it. But Ben, I know, has been spending some time, and I did share it with members of the marketing subcommittee or marketing committee. But I think Ben's probably in the best position to be able to walk us through. He put together with Darcy a kind of a high-level report on the first month's metrics. My first reaction was a little underwhelmed. With that being said, I also understand that it was to kick off to the campaign, and I think there's going to be a real focus on optimization. And what did we learn in month one, and how do we apply it to subsequent months to hopefully improve the engagement numbers and basically all the metrics that we're looking at and tracking to determine success at the end. I think there will be levers and switches that we can pull and push to hopefully see those numbers go up. But Ben, if you're able to share the report, perhaps you can walk through it and talk a little bit about action steps with Darcy next, and anything they might have shared with you about what their initial thoughts are for optimizing moving forward.
Yeah, certainly. Russ, if you could give me permission to share my screen, I would.
Yep, you should have permission now.
Got it. Thank you. All right, so walking you through some of the components here, so everyone can see that marketing report, I hope. So this is prepared by Darcy Creative and the team over there. I'm just going to run pretty quickly through it, and then there's a second report that speaks to the streaming services. That's the ads that kind of show up when you're on the Hulu and other kind of streaming services out there. So we'll start here with and then I do have some updates that's even new information to Jason about how the campaign is going to be tweaked. So here's just the Google ad performance for April, and keep in mind in April it wasn't a full month. There was a ramp up period that took place. So the campaign kind of rolled out through the course of the month. Different elements came on board, so it's not, I wouldn't say it's a full month to really look at. So the Google ads, 238 clicks, almost 300,000 impressions. They seem pretty happy with these numbers. again, similar information here, just in a different format, grid format. So the display advertising seems to get a lot of good impressions. These click-through rates are pretty standard. I wouldn't say that I'm overwhelmed by them or anything like that, but they're pretty standard. There's definitely room for improvement here. Interesting to see. I think they were pretty pleased with the 31,000 views on the YouTube. That they seem pretty good with that. They said click-through rates were low, but as Sam mentioned, we're working to make some adjustments to improve those numbers. Demographics for the Google ads, just what people are seeing them on. It's broken out there in the different colors. So mobile obviously is the king here, and it kind of breaks it down as to how much per cost and impressions and clicks. And here's our kind of gender and age demographics. We're kind of hitting that 25 to 65 group. Seems like heavier on the male and the lower end of that age bracket, and higher on the female end on the other end of that age bracket. But here are some of the things
And
that.
can I interrupt for just 1 second? Can you go back to that previous slide?
Yes, sir.
You might not have the answer to it, but it just strikes
Probably
me,
not.
strikes me as very odd, the boxes down below, the fact that we would skew so heavily at the younger male and then at the older end female. Be interesting just to get Darcy's perspective, obviously targeting criteria or the creative, it's just strange that
Yeah.
just those two very polar opposite audiences seem to be engaging.
Yeah, it's tough to say because I don't know what these. I'm assuming the darker shaded boxes is more concentration.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the levels are that that could be a matter of a couple clicks here and there that are influencing those darker shaded. So I can ask them about that without having much more information there as to what those mean. It's kind of hard to really state. So here are some of the affinity segments, some of the kind of metrics or the criteria they use to decide who we're going to target. So obviously arts and theater aficionados, people that dine out, family focus, movie lovers, music lovers. So those are the groups that they went after. And then some in-market, art museums, so that galleries, that sort of thing. So if they had, a connection to some of our local performance venues and art museums and things like that, you were more frequently going to see the ad in your feed. If you did not, then you would not. Some of the ads, we've seen these before. So you can see some of the feedback we received in the past was, including some of the names of the venues in some of the ads. So that's been included in some fine print when there is space to allow for it. Here's the YouTube. We watched that video as a group some times ago. It seems like the YouTube's performing pretty well for us. It's also performing pretty well on the streaming side. We'll get to that in a minute, but that seems to be doing well as well. So here's the web traffic. You can see it's been a pretty steady ramp up throughout the process with some dips here and there. But throughout the month, there's definitely an upward trajectory, which is great. So that's been really positive. One of the things that we talked about as a group that was really on there sort of as a measurement tool to see how many people were coming to that site was that form that we could have that people would have the ability to fill out. So far we've had about 95 entries into that form, and then there's 95 entries, the survey information attached, an additional 98 submissions with only emails included. So that's people that really didn't fill out the form, they just dumped their email in and moved on, which is great. That the whole purpose of that form is to get people's email addresses so we can further market to them. So they seem pretty happy with the 4% rate. We have had a couple prizes go out the door. This is like win a night out in Portsmouth kind of language. So we've had a couple prizes go out the door for that, for nights out in Portsmouth. Facebook. So Facebook, not sure why this is so grainy. There was some technical issues that they struggled with early on in Facebook. So these numbers are not quite as robust as we would like. I got an email from the team at Darcy just about an hour ago, and said that over the weekend they had tremendous success on the social media. I made a comment to them that, you know, given the criteria that they were using for targeting, I would have been a perfect target. I'm in the right age demographic. I like the right things on Facebook, and social media. Like, I should have been seeing the ads, and I said I hadn't. So I challenged them on that, and they made some changes. And over the weekend, that ad was all up in my feed. So whatever changes, and I don't know the details, whatever changes they made a significant difference. So as you remember, I said that we had about 93 mid-90s form submissions. There was another 100 that came in just over this past weekend with like an 8% conversion rate. So they did have a question for us, and this can be something for the marketing group to look at. Is right now the landing page is getting pretty equal traffic from a within 50-mile radius and from an outside of 50-mile radius. And their question to us is where do we want them to put their energies? And that 50-mile seems to be like their line in the sand. People outside of 50 miles or within 50 miles. So Jason, that's something that you and I and the marketing committee can weigh in on and have some discussion about.
And I have a question for you back on that slide you were just on. Can you ask them what their geo target is for those Facebook posts? Like specifically what you just said, the 50-mile radius. Are they doing something very generic, or are they targeting certain towns, like identifying specific towns?
I would have to ask that. I can look into that. Well, let me look into it.
And then second question would be, what amount, if any, are they paying to boost those posts on average? What type of money are they throwing at that post to get it seen?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd have to ask. I believe I have that data somewhere, but I don't speak this language very well, so I probably didn't retain it.
Hey, Ben, it's Barbara. To your point about you haven't seen it, just you and I are on very different ends of that demographic spectrum. I haven't seen it either. The only place I've seen it would be on the header on Seacoast Online. I've seen it a number of times there and.
Oh, great. Well, that's a place I hadn't seen it. So there you go. So collectively, we are seeing it, which is interesting that I hadn't seen it there and you had. Yeah, whatever was, and there was some language in here, the pixel was not working properly for the start of this ad. So I think they had some issues with it early on, and whatever it is, it's resolved, and they've had great success over the weekend. So I think that was a late last week, update. But I will let them know that as well.
And this is Russ.
Yep.
My understanding was that if you had in your social media that your residence was in Portsmouth, that you were less likely to see that. Is that correct?
It depends on their geo targeting. So it's not that Portsmouth is being excluded. It's just a lot more energy was going to outside the market.
Okay.
Than inside. So me being potentially because I'm a Durham resident, I might be seeing it more because I'm in the Drive market where, if you're there, I think the assumption is that if you live in Portsmouth, you have an understanding of the arts community in Portsmouth. So it wasn't a strong focus, but that gets back to that question they asked, do they want us focused within the 50 miles, outside the 50 miles? And that's, we'll go to the marketing committee to have that discussion. So this is there's some benchmarking. So our click-through rates, here it is, some benchmarks by industry. Our click-through rate was 0.8, 0.80. So it's kind of, middle of the pack here, if you will. It's similar to this auto, but not quite as good as apparel and some of these others. So, it's not so far off. Again, this is pretty minutiae stuff here. on Facebook that I'm not really an expert in. Just to kind of highlight some things on the streaming TV side of things. So this is a product they used through called Effect TV. It's a Comcast product. So it broadcasts ads around. So this seems to be doing pretty well. So, you know, almost all of the video is being viewed in full. People aren't hitting that skip thing. So the impressions are you know, doing well. The hours interacting are seem to be doing well. And there's a lot of great information in here. Let's see here. So just, you know, kind of fun stuff, you know, what are people viewing this on? And Xfinity, you know, your streaming Xfinity service seems to be the number one. You know, your connected TV, web, and then your mobile and other platforms. I thought this seemed like a really good place to be spending our energy, was on the travel channel. 13% of our traffic is being viewed, you know, when people are viewing travel channel content. So I thought that was really great. Seemed like an appropriate spot, but you know, you can see all the different channels and things that people are viewing our content on, some of which I don't even know. Someone would have to tell me what the Magnolia Network is, but anyway.
Improvement.
Oh, yeah, home improvement.
Oh, is it? There you go. Was that Jason, the realtor, would know, of course. So a couple other just kind of impressions here. So there's two spots. So this sort of compares the two spots. Pretty similar results for the two spots. Nothing really, you know, one is not performing, you know, much higher than the other. And then and this gets into the cost per minute and cost per impression and all that sort of stuff. So again, this does share what has been invested so far into the streaming side of things. It seems to, you know, be a heavy investment, but seems to be producing some results. So I'm happy to hear any other questions that are out there. I'm probably unable to answer them, but I'm happy to take them back and get answers and bring them back to you, because this is some much higher level marketing than you know, is in my wheelhouse. So.
And I've got a couple. First thing is the role of PR. I know we talked about its importance in the rollout plan, and I would think that they would actually help support, you know, what we're doing online and with video. Can you talk a little bit about what you know about the current PR plan and how we're doing, you know, how we're going forward with that list?
Yep. Yeah. So we did hold sessions with a lot of the different arts and culture organizations and venues, with our PR agent, Martha Sullivan of Sullivan Communications, to let her really reinforce that she knows enough about the arts and culture community to go out and pitch it to writers and bloggers and people in that world. We have had some great visits recently where we've had people that were coming to town just to come to town, different writers, and we're able to, you know, make sure we incorporated more arts and culture into their visit than we normally would have. Like we had a pretty, his name's escaping me, but a pretty well-established Boston figure. He's one of the anchors of a news channel there, and has a big social media presence and things. Like he came to town and we made sure he got to Strawberry Bank, and I think he really enjoyed the baby animals were going on, and I think he went to a show at somewhere I forget now. So, you know, rather than so far our success has been in people that are coming to town anyways, just incorporating more arts and culture into their visit. What ideally I'd like to see happen is arts and culture dedicated writers come to town, and we haven't had success on that yet. PR is not, you don't just turn the faucet and things flow out, right? It is a long-term game in my experience than like a short-term game. So Martha is out there. She's had those meetings with the arts and culture venues. We are incorporating it into visits that are planned, and we are continuing that work. It will be an ongoing process though, for sure.
Okay, I've got another question for you. In regards to the creative, do we think that a stronger incentive or more specificity around, we've got win a night out? It's very generic. Is there any benefit potentially, and I'd like Darcy's perspective on this, to be more specific, kind of making it, oh, okay, that's something I'd be really interested in.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Good question. And I'm happy to talk to Darcy's team about that. I think we don't have enough, I hate to say it, because of the sort of the glitches that happened in the initial rollout. I don't think we have enough data to say whether it's working or not. If this trend of like really strong numbers from this past weekend continue, say for the next week or two, I think we're probably on a better path. If they soften a little bit, or they're not doing what we want, or they're not continuing to grow, then we might need to look at either different creative or different incentives like you're talking about. But now that we have this to benchmark from, this gives us a good starting point, so we can say, okay, where are we going week by week, and what tweaks can we make and things like that. I do think there's still work to be done on fine tuning the criteria and demographics of who we're going after in getting to the right people. But I think we'll continue to do that over the next 2 months.
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks, Ben, for the update. I was excited to get that information this morning and to hear even more from you. I love seeing that sophisticated level of marketing that you said, like, this is beyond what my normal spend and our normal bandwidth is in our organizations. And I think that was the whole point of this, was just reaching out in different ways and testing different markets for a broad-based campaign. And so, I mean, I personally haven't seen any of the ads on social media. And again, I live in Massachusetts. I like a lot of arts posts, so I would think I was their target demographic. But that doesn't really worry me when I see the positive trends and I see how like they've cast a wide net. And I'm really excited to see things on the list that probably do not show up for a lot of our organizations, including those TV ads and sort of those kinds of pieces that I don't think show up in our budget. So I'm going to be really psyched to see next month's, just see what another month gives us. I'm amazed that the YouTube piece is doing as well as it is, to be honest, because I think the 3 words they chose to focus on are fairly passive and not really in summer trends. Like, I would have thought music and festivals and art would have been above film for summer. Because I think we are wanting to go outside, or we're, and film again sort of crosses over with that Netflix community that we've all been sort of doing during COVID. So I wonder if they're thinking about changing the YouTube key graphic at all, or if that's going to stay static throughout the whole run.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? I don't know.
The YouTube, I veered into one other final comment, which was really the YouTube piece. I'm curious, is that going to stay the same for the rest of this 4-month trial launch that
You're
we're
talking
on?
about the messaging, the creative?
Yeah, the messaging.
The creative?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I think that was my understanding. We can certainly look at, it would be nice to have something a bit more summary as we get into the, here we are mid-May, and there's all these great summer concert series announcements and things like that happening in festivals, and all sorts of great stuff happening that make me super excited for summer. That it would be great to feature. I can talk to the team and see if we have the budget to create more video content. I know that's pretty costly, but I can certainly, put the bug in their ear and see if that's possible.
Yeah, Robin's asking me if that's what I was saying around video content. I honestly don't know. What I'm saying is that if YouTube is performing well with really a cover image that to me feels a little out of season, and not necessarily using the language that's strong enough and Portsmouth enough. You know, right now we are all, a lot of us doing art, we're doing music, and if we want to use the word festivals, that's what the public cares about. And while we have Prescott Park Arts Festival, and a lot of other people might say, well, we don't have a lot of festivals. All you have to do is click into that if you see festivals and find out what we have, right? You know, it's still an incentive. It still provides what people are most interested in right now, which is, you know,
Right, and I think,
outdoor stuff.
Beth, I think what you were referring to was just that snapshot,
Yeah.
that cover page that said art, music,
It's an art, it's our art history
art,
film.
history, film, and that film is, that, it was just those three
Yeah.
words could be changed a little,
Mhm.
is what you're saying, not the content, Ben, but that visual.
So it's really
Oh,
it's a graphic.
okay.
Yeah, it's
I
really
gotcha.
the cover graphic that's hooking them into watching whatever's behind it. And if it's, I'm encouraged that it's performing as well as it is with that cover, I think it could possibly do better.
So I think, yeah, that I think is just the screenshot that they chose. I think it's the last second of that. So there's more messaging than just those three words. Those just happen to be the last three words. So
I thought they were
Oh, interesting, I thought they were the cover, yeah.
no, if you look at the timestamp, if you want to, that says it's at 16 seconds. So I think it's a 15-second spot. So I think that just happens to be the very last screen.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I will confirm that, but I think so.
But I think you could still change that graphic. That's all, so that then that's what you see without redoing the whole video.
Right.
Ben, I have two other questions that I'm wondering if Marcy and Darcy and her team will consider as to whether or not we are being too broad in that we're not specifying a target demographic. It seems to me like we're looking at ages from 25 all the way up. And I'm wondering if we're diluting our dollars by not trying to narrow in on a smaller subset of a demographic. And then secondly, and relatedly, is are we spending our dollars across too many different advertising platforms? Meaning, I guess what I'm asking is for them to really look at that on some of these next few rounds to see if one is outperforming more than the other. Like if YouTube is really where we're seeing better click-throughs, more impressions. As we evaluate the effectiveness of this, are they going to be tweaking their methodology along the way?
Yeah, but
Yeah,
both
Also
great
just-
questions. Sorry.
No, sorry, I just want to piggyback on that. I just want to ask, are they going to be tweaking their methodology along the way, or is it their intention to learn on this first 4 months and then tweak for the next?
Yeah.
Like, I'd love to hear from them on that too.
Sure. I know there will be subtle changes throughout this initial campaign, initial 3 months or so here. And then I would think, lessons learned could be applied to a much broader, longer term campaign. And that's when to your point about specificity, if we are kind of doing this over a longer period of time, we may want to kind of narrow our markets down a little bit. It's a challenge because arts and culture is broad, right? So the family that might be interested in a Strawberry Bank visit, would have the younger parents versus folks that may be more interested in galleries might be of an older. It's such a broad thing. Even music hall alone, your audiences range from young to old depending on the show and what's going on. So it's a big challenge because it's a big thing to try to promote. I can ask and bring it up, but I think that's likely the response I'll get.
Okay, thanks. I'm just thinking that there might be something where we can piggyback on what the state tourism marketing focus has been, not just New Hampshire, but maybe looking at what Maine in Vermont are doing too, and are they specifically targeting an age demographic, or geo-targeting are they doing to see if it really moves the dial for us? And I think the more that we can piggyback on other state level dollars that are flowing into particular regions, then we're all going to be, it's a multiplier effect, right? So I mean, that's frankly, our interest in seeing this succeed is that then for the dollars we use at the music hall, that we'd say, okay, that seems to be working and those methods of advertising seem to be working. So let's double down on that and add and be additive to this campaign here, along with where the state is focusing some of their resources. And I know our state needs to be more focused on arts and culture. I know that they, we
Yes.
recently crossed that bridge with them at the tourism summit, which by the way was great. But I think it really does need to have a compounding effect for it to really make any difference for any of us on our bottom lines.
So Ben, this is Russ. If I can jump in really quickly. I think what I'm hearing is potential opportunity if we can finalize and secure the funding for extending this beyond the initial 4 to 6 month trial that we're in the middle of right now. So I do like the idea of having a very specific plan and setting benchmarks, but if we can hopefully hear soon from the city on whether or not additional funding is coming to continue this work for the next several years, then that's when I think what Tina and Beth are talking about can really come into play, because it's going to take some time to understand samples and say this sample is working, this sample is not working. It's not necessarily going to happen in a 3 to 4 month trial, but if we can secure 3 years of funding to do this, then we can look at seasonal, we can look at targets, we can look at what the state's doing, we can look at those things and really try and refine over time. And I love Tina's statement that having this data for our organizations is going to help us vet how we do our own marketing and see what's working, what's not working, and take our very limited resources independently and kind of piggyback on what's happening statewide. Does that make sense, Tina?
Yes, yeah, thank you.
So I don't know, Kate, if you, or well, before we go to that, Ben, do you have more on this?
No, the only thing I just did want to comment is, we did put a big bug in the state's ear about arts and culture marketing. And I think we made it abundantly clear. The state is investing significantly in some asset collection and asset creation, meaning photography and videography. They received several $1 million from the federal government economic development dollars for tourism promotion, and they're investing, I think, over $1 million of that in photo and video asset collection and creation. And I made it super clear that we wanted, and then we have access to those resources afterwards to promote Portsmouth and use them in our own content and things like that. It's basically like a big video library and photo library that we can access. So I made it really clear that, hey, we're going to be spending some money, hopefully, on arts and culture marketing, and we can make our money go a lot further if we don't waste it, on going to take photos and videos. And if that is already in the can and available for us to use, and it's good stuff like the state generally gets, then we'll be able to really just take that line item off and spend more money on actual ad spend. So I believe that message was received, and I think it's hopefully will bring a stronger partnership between the state and us in the future.
Thanks, Ben. Any other questions? I was going to ask Councilor Cook at that moment when I was talking about extending this with funding beyond where she sees things standing regarding extending funding through whatever source.
Thank you. I would say that right now, the council will be looking at any funding extensions, at least in May, just because we're in the middle of budget. And I think it was anticipated that the request was coming from ARPA funds, and I know that that's on the, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that's on the city manager's radar already. She's already highlighted that, even to the council that she's expecting a request around arts and nonprofits on ARPA funds. But the earliest the council would even discuss that is sometime in June, and I don't know what the schedule is. That is really determined by the mayor at this point. But I'm happy to put a bug in his ear about this as well, and about, you know, about the timeline here that the committee is looking at for funding.
So in December, we submitted a 6-point, request for 4% of the ARPA funds, which I think equaled $480,000. And do you know if the city's going to be looking for a more detailed proposal, or is that kind of request in already?
So I am not certain how the city manager is handling those requests right now.
Okay.
I know she's had several come in from several different departments. She was aware of this one coming in because she's mentioned it. She's only mentioned 2 or 3. But I imagine there's an internal process, and you know more about this than I do about those requests and how they're coming into the city manager. And then there of course will be council specific requests and priorities. So we haven't started that reconciliation process. I imagine we're trying to get through the budget first.
Okay.
And we're trying to also identify anything that's an emergency that might come up and that we need to cover with ARPA funds that's related to the pandemic. So,
Yep.
So I don't know that those have all been identified either.
And also just for background context, she did make a point of saying in the press conference, rolling out the budget, that 48% of the ARPA funds are still unallocated. So.
Okay.
That's very
I was just thinking about the timeline. We're not gonna be getting the AFTA data till 6 months after the end of the survey's time. So that we're looking at October 2023. And we've said this before, we can talk about the fact that it was 58 million. If it turns out that it's less, I think we still have to look back and say, we need to get back to that. If it's the same or more, we can say, this is great, this is what it is, but without us, it's gonna go down. So, but we, unfortunately, we don't have those numbers, and probably because there's such a delay till next fall. Because this started so late. Oh, and I didn't say that, I know it's off topic, but the organizations are gonna be asked to do their financials in January. That's when that's gonna start. So that'll be another push for us.
Are people asked to answer the questions through the lens of what the last 2 years have looked like, or how they're spending money right now on the AFTA survey
This minute,
this minute?
you mean when they take the survey?
When they take the
One of
survey.
that night.
It's that night.
That night, what did you spend tonight?
Right.
Yeah.
Got it.
So that's why if somebody shows up at multiple of your events,
Okay.
and if they say, well, I've already taken it the last event, no, you can still take
You
it.
can take it again.
Absolutely.
Got it. Got it. Okay.
Okay. Well, I mean, I view this particular project, the marketing project, as direct pandemic response. There's no question in my mind. This is about rebuilding audiences, getting people back into cultural venues, regardless of the type of cultural venue within our community. The heavy focus on our nonprofit organizations within the community. So, I'm hopeful that this part of the project will be fully funded. It's not a huge ask in the scheme of the amount of money that the city's received in rescue plan funds. So I think the key for us is going to be the timing and understanding, Ben, from you and Jason, like at what point do we have to have it confirmed that we've got money to go forward so that there isn't a gap? Because what I want to avoid is having like a couple month gap in the middle and having to relaunch. I want to make sure that we know that we're going to be able to keep running and forging ahead for a period of years, and that this pilot is not interrupted by a gap while we wait on a decision on funding. So I think that's what we're going to need from you, Ben, is to know when is like the 11th hour, and making sure that we can make a commitment to go forward without having there be an interruption in the work.
Okay, I will talk to the team and make sure that we have an answer. You know, I think some of it, well, I'll go through that process.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Can I just ask one question?
Yeah, go ahead, Beth.
And I'm asking this not because I'm not satisfied with Darcy Creative, it's just that this was a pilot. Do we have to evaluate our own, as a committee, our own satisfaction with the work and re-engage with them, you know, officially? I mean, do we want, I would hate to go out with to Darcy and say, okay, we're gonna be taking these next steps, and then something doesn't work out. Just process question.
That's a good question.
It's a great question.
Well, especially.
Well, even beyond that, sorry, go ahead.
Well, that was just, the comment was just that because funding's from the city, but go ahead, Ben.
I was just gonna say, even our role as the chamber is also to be determined as well. I mean, our
Correct.
contract with the city is for this project. And you know, should you receive additional funding as a committee, you are not locked in to partner with us. So, you know, that's something to consider. Not that I want to talk myself out of this, but you know, just know that.
Russ.
I also wanted to highlight that, you know, when you hit a certain threshold of spending with the city, everything goes out for RFP. So I think there'll be some questions around whether or not, if funding is allocated, it needs to go out for RFP. Unfortunately, that turnaround time may take a while to do an RFP. So I'll start asking questions around timeline now, but it would be really helpful if we had a kind of a deadline for the end of the pilot so that we can push back timing from there.
Do we know on the timing when the pilot expires right now, Ben?
Off the top of my head, I do not. I have it in an email, and if you give me a moment, I can put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
The date on everything up there was June 26th.
June 26th.
I think it's coming up fast.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, definitely fast. I believe it's the end of the fiscal year. Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, if we were going to do an RFP that should be going out this week. So, you know, so that's a danger. I mean, there's a lot of risk associated with having to pause and restart. So the sooner we can know about funding for going forward and what's going to need to happen, it's going to be critical, I think.
The other positive side of that, of a pause, as long as the pause is brief enough, though, is that we have an opportunity, if we do have to have an RFP, we have an opportunity to utilize what we've learned through the Darcy Creative Pilot and be more specific about
That's
what
true.
we're looking for.
That's true.
Which is, you know, even if it's with Darcy again, I mean, we will want to take a moment to pause, reflect, focus that next phase.
Beth can always find the silver lining in there.
Well, I'm excited about this. I like seeing that arts in Portsmouth are showing up in places that they don't normally show up. And we are gonna need audiences back.
And
Yeah, well-
I think we do have to assume an RFP, so we're asking for almost $500 million.
Yeah, well, while we're asking for almost $500,000, I don't know that we're spending almost $500,000 in one location. This definitely seems to have the biggest price tag of everything that we've talked about. So it's likely, I think you're right, we are going to need an RFP, but I don't want anyone watching this thinking that that $480,000 we're requesting is just for this project and nothing else. There's other things that we're looking at. But I definitely feel like, I mean, we're coming up on 6 months since that request went into the council. And I'd love to get it moving forward in some way, shape, or form. I know that the council understands, and the community understands that this is pandemic relief, but I'm still not convinced that people who are not yet returning to the venues understand the situation in venues, so that people aren't always coming back in the numbers, and that's sporadic. There's some events that pack the house, and then there are some events that are underperforming because we're still coming out of the pandemic. And we need to be able to address that and get some recovery going for the organizations. Because as I said before, even if all the venues start packing their houses tonight and keep going forward that way, there's a long period of time that has to happen before we could right the ship from what's happened over the past 2 years. It's not just like, once that happens, we're solved. We're making up for lost ground. So this is a critically important effort. So I appreciate all your work on it, Ben, and Jason, and your whole team.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. All right, so we have just a couple of minutes left, and there's really only one quick short update. I connected with Stephanie before the meeting. Barbara and I met last week to put the agenda together. We talked a little bit about the effort to do the next cultural plan and get that going. And I have to date, I can actually do that right here in the meeting. I have to date the following committee members who are interested in being involved with the cultural planning group. Tina Sautel, Barbara Master, Courtney Perkins, who's on the line, Nico Gallo, and myself. I'm assuming that Councilor Cook is going to want to be involved as representative from the city, and that Sean's also going to be involved as staff from the city with the cultural planning effort.
Yes.
Yes. Are there any other committee members in the meeting right now who I missed that want to be involved? Jason?
Yeah.
And Beth. Oh yeah, Beth was on my list too. Beth.
You can add me as to us. I, with the caveat that I can't take a leadership position in it because of the other stuff I've got about,
Yeah,
but I would
yeah.
love to be involved.
Okay. All right. So I've added those
Yeah,
names. And Genevieve?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, you know.
Yeah, you probably did. This is why I bring it. This is why I bring it up in the meeting. We'd like to seek an additional 5 to 7 community members at large to participate, so that it's not over heavily populated with people from just this group. So Barbara and I talked about the idea of putting together an application process from people from the community to reach out to the community and say that people can apply to be on the cultural planning committee. And Stephanie's going to work to help us get a Google form set up online through the city website that we can direct people to, and that they can go and sign up to be on the committee so we can work on populating the committee as a whole.
Yeah, I did send a quick email to Suzanne Woodland just to clarify that because this is a mayor's committee, we don't have to go, or you wouldn't have to go through that process.
Yeah.
For a subcommittee or a work group, so she hasn't had a chance to reply yet,
Yeah.
but I'll let you know as soon as I have.
Yeah, so we're gonna figure out those
One way or the other.
details. Yeah, we'll figure out those details and figure out how to get this group populated. I think summertime is difficult for starting things, so it's gonna take a little time to ramp this up. So I think it would be a good goal to like get everyone organized, get schedules figured out to hit the ground running in September. I don't know if people feel more urgency than that, but I think we've got a lot going on with just our own jobs over the summertime, but also with everything that's happening with the marketing committee and AFTA, making sure that we're giving enough attention to those items as they're going forward, and working through the AFTA funding and things like that. So I think if we can have like a strong group ready for a kickoff meeting September 1st, I think we're going to be in good shape.
Stephanie, regardless of whether we have to do this, I think having an open application process for the community is something that struck us as really important after we heard from Chris and Ellen, and we certainly don't want anybody to think we don't want them included. And when Russ and I put these rules on, what we did with Mayor Beckstead back then was all the applications came in, we reviewed them with him to see what were kind of best matches, so we didn't have, it's one thing to want to be on a committee, it's another thing to say, what is that person to bring to the committee? So the public's ability to apply, we thought was really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, the goal is public participation. I just need to check the formalities and how that application process takes place. But one way or the other, the idea is to reach out to them.
Excellent. So that's the update on that. Any questions or anything that we didn't cover today that people want to mention? All right, Excellent, it says 11:58, it's 12:58. So we are out on time. Thank you all. I really appreciate it when people are able to make it in person so that we're able to get our quorum and be able to approve things. So thank you for all coming out today. And I also love the fact that we have Zoom for people who can't be here and are able to participate in the meeting. So thank you all. I will see you at our June meeting. Take care.
Thanks, Brett. Thank you.
All right.